Let's open the document. We'll see. Okay. See, in the last session, guys, I've explained about some annotations, but I haven't given any statements. But now I want to write explanation statements parallelly. When it comes to Spring annotations, right? Uh, the annotations, what we discussed are called stereotype annotations. Okay, correct. Okay, I will add them later. But first we discussed about annotation called what? At the rate component. Okay. So this annotation that we discussed. I told already. So if you want to specify that a particular or a class is a Spring managed bean. Okay. If you want to specify that a class is a Spring managed bean component, at the class level, we are going to do this annotation. The annotation name is called what? At the rate component. In at the rate component is annotation for that. That is what in the last class also it was. Okay. At the rate component annotation. And I just want to write statements related to that one by one today. So the statement which I want to write is, it is a class level annotation. And if it is a class level annotation, we can able to write them at the class level before the class. Okay, right. So this annotation is used to specify that. For the purpose of this annotation, it is used to specify that a class is a Spring managed bean class. Right. I told in Spring, okay, in Spring, there is a facility called auto scanning. That is also called components auto scanning. It is one facility provided by Spring Framework. In Spring Framework, we have a facility called components auto scanning. And during that auto scanning, what I told in the last class, these are all we discussed in the last class only, right? So during auto scanning, what will happen? The Spring is going to search for the Spring Bean classes. So how Spring will identify during that auto scanning? Components auto scanning is a one facility provided by Spring Framework. During that auto scanning, Spring will identify the Spring Bean classes with the help of this annotation. Which annotation? At the rate component. If this annotation is present, then Spring will identify that it is a Spring Bean class and will register it with the application context. Application context is called Spring container, right? Registers with the Spring application context. Nothing but Spring container, right? So during components auto scanning. So during components auto scanning, Spring will identify the classes with component annotation as Spring Beans and registers them with the Spring application context. In a Spring application context is also called as what? Spring container. Instead of writing Spring container, I'm using the word called what? Spring application context. Okay, so this is one facility available called what? Components auto scanning. So Spring will identify the classes with at the rate component annotation Spring Beans and registers them with the Spring application context. And I told by writing component annotation, okay, is it going to become service layer class or a data access layer class or presentation layer class or API layer class? By using @component annotation, is it going to become like any specific layer or it is general purpose component? Yes, it is identified as general purpose component. It's a general purpose component. So which can be used in multiple layers. So a class with a component annotation, a class with a component annotation will be identified as a general purpose Spring Bean, could be used in multiple layers. So this is all in the last class I told, which is related to which annotation? @component annotation. @component annotation. Okay. All right. I'll tell you how to enable components auto scanning. That annotation today we are going to look into that. @configuration class, component scan annotation. So I'm going to talk about such kind of annotations today. You don't worry on that. But as of now, what I'm trying to say is that there is a feature available called components auto scanning. Very good. So basically this annotation is to specify that what it is a Spring Bean component class. That's it. It's a general purpose Spring Bean and it can be used in multiple layers. Any layer we can use it. It is not telling particularly this class is presentation layer class or service layer class or API layer class or else what data access layer class. It is not telling all these things, right? It is only just specifying what it is the general purpose Spring Bean component. For that, which annotation I'm using? @component annotation I'm using it. Okay. So I told in the last class. See, for an example, we are writing like this. What we are writing, for example, we are writing @component we are writing. Today we are going to see if possible an application with these annotations. @component I'm writing. Okay. I'm writing @component. I'm writing, let's say, for example, public class. Could be, doesn't matter what the name it is. Let's say I want to use a class called validator with some methods inside. We are not worrying on that. Now you tell me this class is registered in a Spring container with an ID as what? This class is registered with an ID as what in the Spring container in the Spring application context. This class is registered. This bean is registered with ID what? This bean class is registered with an ID called validator. Class name, but first letter in lowercase. So I want to write here. The above class is registered in the Spring application context. Spring application context is called container only. Is registered in the Spring application context with an ID as, what's the ID? Validator. Means class name as ID, na? But suppose if you want to customize it, then I told which annotation? Component with which with parameter. What's the parameter we should pass? Value. Value equals to, we can specify something like that. Let's say, for example, I'm writing, okay, value is equal to ID1. What is the value is equal to? ID1. Now say public class validator. It has some methods. Now you can say the above class is registered in the Spring application context. With an ID as what? With an ID as ID1. There is a way to customize it. So if you want to customize the ID, then which parameter you should pass? Value. Of course, you remember that. Is it mandated to pass value here or optional? Optional, because you are writing annotation with a single parameter. And what is the name of that parameter here? Value. That's why we can remove this value. We can directly pass ID1 also. That's your wish, but not mandated to write value. This is in the last class I told. This is called which annotation I'm talking about? Component annotation. Okay. Next, what's another annotation that we have? What the other annotation that we have discussed? Service. And you know, for service annotation, for service annotation. I told service annotation is a derived annotation or inherited from which annotation only? Component only. And this is also could be used at what level only? Class level only. Yesterday, whatever the annotations we have discussed, all those annotations we can use at what level? It is a class level annotation only, right? Okay. Then what is the purpose of this annotation? What is the purpose of this annotation? It is to specify that a class is a business layer class. Which class? Business layer class. For that, which annotation we are using? @service. @service is derived from @component. That's why we no need to again specify @component here. You are writing @service means already it is a component. A service is also a component. I told in the last class, controller is a component. REST controller is a component. Repository is a component. There is a easy relationship between these annotations. Okay, because service is derived from component. So component is a base annotation for service. Okay, so it is also what level annotation? It is a class level annotation. It is a class level annotation. It is a class level annotation. Tell me, this is used to specify that a class is a Spring Bean. Of course, you are writing service means a Spring Bean component only, right? It's to specify that a class is a service layer or business logic layer, any word. Business logic layer class. Okay, we are marking that this class is a business logic layer class. Are you able to follow me? Or business layer, service layer or business logic layer class. Okay, so tell me. Okay, now tell me, this @service is derived from @component. @component. Okay, then tell me if it is derived from @component. Okay, during auto scanning, the Spring container will identify and register them in the Spring container or not? Yes. Okay. So as it is statement, I just want to copy for all the remaining annotations. Okay, so during components auto scanning, Spring will identify the classes with @service annotation, because @service annotation is derived from @component only as Spring Beans and register them with the application context. Application context. I told in the previous class, by using @service annotation at the class level, we can identify that what this class is a business logic layer class. By using @component annotation, we can just specify that what is a general purpose component. It could be used in any layer. It is not containing the logic related to one particular layer. It is containing a logic that could be used in multiple layers. It's a common logic containing in multiple layers. Okay, right. Service is to specify that it is a business logic layer class. So already we discussed about service in the last class only. Again the same thing. Okay, again the same thing. I'm writing example. I'm writing example. What's the annotation I can write now? @service. @service, public class name could be some service. Let's say in the last class I told, okay, otherwise we'll take employee service. I'll take employee service. Am I clear with that? Public class employee service. Okay. Now there are some methods available in service. Now you tell me this is registered with which ID? Now this is registered with which ID? Employee service. It is registered with which ID? Employee service. Am I clear with that? It is registered with employee service.
So try to understand this, guys. Employee service. Just a minute. Right. Registered with ID, employee service. E in lowercase. So what is the statement I want to write? The above class is registered in the Spring application context with ID. In the Spring application context. Application context is a container with the ID as employee service. E in lowercase, no? right? Suppose if you want to customize, how do you customize? By using value attribute. So that again, I don't want, right, for every annotation. Okay, you just take care of that. Now like this is called component. This is called what? Service. Next we have one more is called what? A repository. Repository. Next one is what? Controller. Next one is called what? REST controller. Like this, we have all annotations available, right? So if I copy the same, then I can able to change to okay. Now I want write for @repository. Tell me which annotation I'm talking about. @repository. Tell me it is also what level annotation? Class level. That a class belongs to service layer class or a data access layer class? It is a data access layer. I told data access layer has another name. What layer? Persistence layer, or also called repository layer. So we have multiple names. Anyhow, okay, this to specify that a class is a data access layer or persistence layer class. Persistence layer class. Persistence layer class. Okay, persistence layer class. Now tell me, @repository also derived from where? @component. Okay, and during auto scanning, same thing will happen. This is for repository annotation statements. And example we can write. Example, we write @repository. Okay, let's say my class name is what? Public class employee DAO. What's my class name? Employee DAO. In this class, I'm going to write all the methods which are used to perform what? Data access layer operations. What operations? Data access layer operations. Okay, right. And of course, it is registered with which ID now? Employee DAO. So the above class is registered in Spring application context. In Spring application context, with ID as what? What's the ID of this? Employee DAO. If you want to customize, you can customize. This is for, okay, this is for repository. Similarly, there is one more addition available called what? Controller. Controller. I just want to change the name. I want to talk about controller. Tell me. The class is a service layer class or presentation layer? Presentation layer. Presentation layer. Or otherwise we can say UI layer, anything. User interface layer. Okay, that is called controller. And see, controller is also derived from where? Component only. Controller derived from component only. And everything same. Just in place of that, I'm just going to use a name called what? Controller. Now, okay, now example only I'm just going to add. @controller public class employee controller with the relevant methods. There are some methods required. We are going to see the coding part later. Now you tell me the above class is registered in the Spring application context with ID as what? Employee controller. Very good. Next, there is one more annotation we discussed, that is called REST controller. What is the annotation name? REST controller. REST controller is derived from controller. Of course, controller is derived from component. But by writing REST controller, it is to specify that a class is a which layer class? API layer class. It is not business logic layer class. It is called what layer class? API layer class. A class is a API layer class. that a class is a API layer class. Do remember that it's a API layer class. Now tell me, at the rate, see, at the rate REST controller is derived from at the rate controller. At the rate controller. At the rate controller is derived from at the rate component. Okay, and everything same. Auto scanning is applicable for this one also. REST controller. So these are all the guys. These are all the different annotations that I have with me. Am I clear with that? REST controller. Next, we also discussed, okay, I will write some class example. And this is most important annotation in Spring. At the rate REST controller. Let's say, for example, public class employee API. Some methods. In Spring Boot, you are going to learn all these things. So, but presently we are discussing only annotations. Okay, right, good. So these are all the annotations in the last class I told. Good. Now I told in the last session, there is one more annotation that is also comes to a child or derived from component annotation that is called configuration. So today, now we are going to understand about configuration. Okay. So first of all, where do we write at the rate configuration? I'll tell you. Guys, suppose I'm writing a class. Please understand, I'm writing a class. And on top of the class, I want to write at the rate configuration. Actually, we use this annotation at class. Again, this is also class level. All stereotype annotations are going to be used at what level only? All the stereotype annotations are to be used in what level only? Class level only. In class level only, we are going to use all these annotations. Okay, na? Right. Stereotype annotations are used at what level? Class level. Means all these annotations were at above the class. Above the class. That's why it is called what level? Class level. It is called class level. Am I clear with that? Okay, now come to the point. Now you try to understand here. What I'm trying to say here is, okay, by writing this configuration, we are marking that our class is a Java configuration class. Java configuration class. Understand clearly? By writing this annotation called configuration, we are going to mark that our class is a Java configuration class. Very good. So when do you write Java configuration class? Suppose if you want to avoid writing the what file? XML configuration file. If you want to avoid XML configuration file, then you can write which class? If you want to avoid writing the XML configuration file, then which class you will write? Java configuration class. How can I mark that my class is a Java configuration class? How can I mark that my class is a Java configuration class? By writing this annotation. What is annotation? At the rate configuration. This annotation that we are going to write on top of the class. On top of the class. What is the annotation name? At the rate At the rate configuration also derived from at the rate component. Okay, observe it. First of all, of course, in the last class I told, but today I'm going to tell you more on that. Don't worry. See, let us open the Spring documentation. Okay, which one we are talking about? At the configuration. Now let us open the configuration annotation from the Spring framework. Okay. Okay, good. Now you tell me what is the parent annotation of configuration. Remaining all you remove it. I mean, you don't need to worry about that. These are all different parents. But you tell me this is called what type of annotation? At the rate component. So configuration annotation, okay, is derived from component annotation. Component at the rate component annotation. Okay, right. Please try to understand now. If I talk about, I'll tell you. I don't want all this. I want, these are all I'll explain, don't worry. But my intention is to come to this one. Okay, listen to me. First, let me explain, then you'll understand. Because next I'm going to talk about this annotation called component scan. This is a way to how we can able to enable the component scan. That's one more annotation that we are going to see it. Okay, right. See here. Okay, I'm talking about which annotation now currently? Component. Just to show you, configuration annotation is derived from which annotation only? Component only. Indicates that a class declares one or more bean methods and may be processed by the Spring container to generate bean definitions and service requests for those beans at runtime. Actually, so okay, it's a big statement. It is a documentation, so statements are like that. But we need to understand. Okay, we need to understand. Let's come to the point here. When do you write @configuration annotation? First of all, if you want to mark that your class is a Java configuration class. To mark that your class is what? Java configuration class. To mark that your class is what? Java configuration class. Okay, Java configuration class. Which annotation that we are going to write? @configuration. @configuration. Okay, what will you write in the Java configuration class? If you are marking that your class is a Java configuration class, then in that Java configuration class, we are going to create bean methods. What we are going to create? Bean methods. Bean methods, I mean, again, don't misunderstand them. Bean methods, I mean, they are the methods which are going to create the beans. They are the methods which are going to produce, otherwise which are going to return objects. Okay, so I want to tell you and try to understand now. There is one more addition that you are going to learn called bean methods. Means they have annotation called @bean. What's the annotation? @bean. So I'm writing a configuration class. Configuration class, configuration annotation on top of the class means what? It is a Java configuration class. In the configuration class, what we can write is methods. What we can write? Methods. Those methods are called what methods? Bean methods. Because on top of the methods, we are going to write this annotation. Which annotation we are going to write? @bean. Okay, @bean means what? The configuration class is going to contain the methods with which annotation? @bean means what? The configuration class is a source of bean methods. Is a source of what methods? Bean methods. Okay. For example, I'm writing like this now. I'll tell you what does it mean. First, @configuration. Public class app config. Some class names are, class name can be any name. @configuration. Public class, what config? App config. App config, application configuration, something. Some class I have created. Tell me inside the class, I can create what? Methods. They are called what methods? Bean methods. Why I am calling them as bean methods? Because I am going to write which annotation on top of them? @bean. So what is the meaning of @bean? It is indicating that this method is going to return an object that should be stored in the Spring container application context as a Spring bean. I'll repeat once again. By writing @bean annotation, it is indicating that what? This method returns an object. That object should be stored in the Spring container as a bean, as a Spring bean. So the object returned by the method should be treated as a Spring bean. For that, which annotation we are writing? @bean. Okay, I will show you first @bean as well. If you know this, it is well and good, so that it'll be easy for us to understand the other things as well. See guys, everyone try to understand which annotation I'm talking about. @b. Look at this @b. We want to open the documentation of @b. This annotation, what's the annotation name? What's the annotation name? @bean. Annotation name is bean. Means @bean is the way what we write. Please try to understand here. Tell me, for every annotation, target is defined. What is the target defined for this annotation? Method, annotation type. Means can I use this annotation at the class level? No. When can I use annotation at the class level? In the target, if a type is available. If a target contains type, which means I can use at class level. But now I can use at which level? Method level. Otherwise, I can also use it on top of the other annotation. Annotation type means what? I can use this annotation on top of the another annotation. That's what the meaning of annotation type. Am I clear with that? But I cannot use this annotation at what? I can't use this annotation at what? Class. Because in the target, what is not available? Type. When can I use at class level? If the target contains type. But here the target has no type here. What is available in place of that? Method is available and annotation type is available, which means this annotation I can use at method level, and this annotation also I can use on top of another annotation. I can use before the method or before another annotation. Before means above, whatever it is. So indicates that a method produces a bean to be managed by the Spring container. For example, look at this. For example, there is one method created called mybean. Okay, there is a method created. On top of the method means above the method, which annotation is provided, guys? @bean annotation is provided. What this mybean method produces? Object of mybean class. That's the way of understanding this method. This is a way of understanding this, because what is the return type of the method? Mybean. What is mybean? It's a class. It's a class. This is class. This is method. Am I right? The first one is class. This is method. Means what is the return type of the method? Mybean class. Which means this method is going to return an object of which class? Mybean class. Mybean class. Let's say instantiate and configure the mybean object and return obj. For example, assume that this obj is nothing but what? Mybean object. Now you tell me which annotation is given on top of that? @bean. @bean. Now you tell me this method is going to return what? Means produces what? Producing means returning. This method produces what? Object. Object of which class? Mybean class. And this is going to be stored in the Spring container. This is going to be stored in the Spring container. Spring container. Actually, who will create the objects and initialize objects in Spring framework? Spring container. Spring container. You try to understand, I'll tell you. Spring container. But in Spring, there is a facility provided that Spring will do this. Spring will do this. And wherever it is necessary, you can also create the object and store in the container. See, actually, who will create the object? Container. Spring container. And who will take care of injecting the dependencies? Spring container. Who will take care of initializing the object? Spring container, right? In Spring container, container creates the object, container injects the dependencies, will perform the initialization. The bean lifecycle is managed by Spring container. But in Spring, other option available. What's the other option available? If necessary, a programmer, a developer can also create the object and will take care of initializing that object. Means a developer can create object by himself, Developer can take care of injecting the dependency objects. And finally, that object, developer can store it in the Spring container, can push to Spring container. Are you able to follow me? Right? So tell me, if I want to create object as a developer, and if I want to initialize my object, but I want to push it into the container, then tell me which method I have to create. Which method I should create? For that, which method I should create? Bean method I should create. Which method? Bean method. Where should I write this bean method? In configuration class. Which class? Configuration class. Are you understanding my point now? Very good. Try to understand now. Try to get the concept here. Okay? Good. See. Better. I will
Can
add
you repeat again the last part?
configuration. I'll write at the rate configuration. It will be repeated 4 or 5 times repeated, not 1 2 times. Okay.
Okay, sir.
You can see that. Yeah. So this is configuration annotation. Tell me, as per the definition, indicates that a class declares one or more what? Bean methods, and it may be processed by the Spring container to generate bean definitions and service requests for those beans at runtime. Means what you understood now? This configuration annotation indicates that a class declares one or more bean methods. Who is bean method? Who is bean method? Bean method means it is a method with annotation at the rate bean. When do you write at the rate bean annotation at the top of the method? You want to create a method to produce an object, and that object you want to push into Spring container. Means what? You can create the object. You can initialize your object by injecting the dependencies and all. That object you can push into Spring container. So in Spring, 2 options are available. What is option number 1? Container only will create the objects, will inject the dependencies, and will manage it. Second option available is what? Developer can also create the object and also can initialize it by injecting the dependencies and then push it into Spring container. Are you able to get my point? Both options are available. Very good. For the second option, for the second facility, which method that we are going to create inside the configuration class? At the rate bean. You see, this is called which class? You see the example they have given in the documentation. At the rate configuration means it is which class? Configuration class. Tell me in the configuration class which method is created? Bean method is created. Are you able to follow me? Which method is created? Bean method is created. Bean method. So tell me, at the rate configuration indicates that a class declares one or more bean methods. So we can add only one bean method or more bean methods also. We can create the more bean methods also. Depends on our requirement. Depends on our requirement. Are you getting my point? Yes. Okay. Now come to the point here. So you got the information which is related to 2 annotations at a time. What are the 2 annotations I'm talking about? What are the 2 annotations I'm talking about? I'm talking about first annotation called what? At the rate configuration. Next annotation I'm talking about what? At the rate bean. Tell me, at the rate configuration is a what level annotation? It is a class level annotation. It is a class level annotation. What is the annotation name? At the rate configuration. Configuration. Very good. For example, I'm writing public class. Okay, class app config. Okay, app config. Now tell me, inside the class, which annotation I'm going to use? At the rate bean. At the rate bean. For example, I'm writing public. Please understand. For example, public, I'm writing return type is service A. Return type is what? service A. Suppose my method name is SA. Suppose I am creating one configuration class like this. Then tell me in the configuration class, I am creating which method? Bean method. How to declare that it's a bean method? Annotation is @bean. Where can I write these bean methods? In the configuration class only. These bean methods are allowed to write only in the configuration class. This is called Java configuration class. How to mark that this is a Java configuration class? By writing this annotation. Which annotation? @configuration. So it is not a service layer class. It is not a data access layer class. It is not a presentation layer class or API layer class. It is what class? Configuration class. Java configuration class. How to mark that it is a Java configuration class? @configuration. Inside the class, what we can create? One or more bean methods we can create. One or more bean methods we can create. How do you create bean methods? By writing the annotation called @bean. What @bean indicates? This method is producing an object. Producing what? An object. Object nothing but in Spring terminology, bean. This is producing a bean, nothing but producing what? Object, and that should be pushed into container. Are you able to get my point? So that is going to be stored in the Spring container. That is going to be pushed into Spring container. That should be stored into Spring container. So for that, which annotation we are writing? @bean. Okay, good. So if suppose I am creating the object, means who is responsible for injecting the dependencies of the object also? Developer only responsible. Now developer is responsible for what purpose here? Developer is responsible for creating the object and also injecting the dependencies. Creating, initializing, all these things are the responsibilities of the developer. Right? Once the object is created and after setting all the properties, the dependencies are injected. Now this object can be pushed into Spring container. Okay. So that's what the way of writing @bean. And how many times I can write @bean annotation inside this class? Multiple times. I'll tell you next. One more. Okay. Then when are we going to use this type of bean methods? Because already, why should I take pain? This is a very common thing, right? Common question is what? Already Spring will take care of what? Creating the object, initializing the object, destroying. Who will take care? Spring container. Why should I take a pain to write @bean method and all these things? Am I mad? When container is already providing this facility, where container is only taking care of all these things, why should I create bean method by myself? Are you able to follow me? Correct? Good.
Yes.
Sometimes what happens, I'll tell you. Sometimes, please try to understand. You are writing your class, public class, your class. Suppose I'm writing. Sometimes what happens, you are writing your class. Your class depends on predefined class. Tell me, please try to understand me now. This is class you are writing. You are writing. Your class depends on what? Predefined class. Predefined class means what? Which is given by the Spring framework. Which is given by the Spring framework. We can use it or not? Can we use the predefined classes in the application development? Yes. You are writing a core Java program. Okay. Without using system class given by Java, can you print the output? If you want to display something on the console, which class you have to use? System. Your class is hello world. What is your class? Hello world. What's the predefined class you are using? System. Without system class or without a string class, can you run the Java program? Obviously, no. Public static void main in parameter, main method parameter is what? String array. Who is a string? Your class, like hello world class. Hello world, like hello world class. Are you creating string class by yourself? No. Who is string class? Predefined class. String is a predefined class, which is nothing but what? Our classes can use predefined classes in the application development. Here also, this is your class. This is your class. Your class is depending on predefined class. Who given this predefined class? Spring Framework. Spring Framework. Please try to understand. Which framework? Spring Framework. Very good. Please try to understand that. If it is your class, then Spring Container will create the object, and will inject the dependencies. Are you able to get my point? Will initialize the object. But if your class depends on predefined class, then tell me, for injecting the dependency object, which class object is required? Predefined class. Do remember, understand this point clearly, guys. For a predefined class, I repeat once again, for a predefined class, Spring Container does not create object. Spring Container will only create the objects for your classes. Are you able to follow me? Am I clear with my point? Are you getting my point? Suppose two classes are there. Okay, understand this. Two classes are there. Easy to understand, sir. First time, now it will take some time, but later it's easy. Very easy. See, guys, there are two classes are there. One is service A. Another one is service B. Tell me, service A and service B both are predefined classes or user defined classes? User defined classes. Let us say service A depends on service B. Tell me, who is the dependent object and who is the dependency object? Obviously, service A is the dependent object and service B is its a dependent. Tell me, who will create the service A object? Means a dependent object? Container, Spring Container. Who will create the dependency object? Spring Container. Who will inject the dependency object to the dependent object? Spring Container. Because service A and service B both are user defined classes. What classes? User defined classes. Example. Another example. Everybody, please try to understand. Please try to understand. Let me take. Sorry, everybody try to understand. Let me take. I am creating service A, and there is a class that is called, just understand, sir, nothing to work. There is a class called JMS template. In this, service A is your class, but JMS template is not your class. It is a predefined class. Tell me, service A. Tell me, service A depends on which class now? JMS template. In this, service A is which class? Dependent class. JMS template is its dependency class. But in this situation, container can only create the dependent object, but a container does not create dependency object. Why? Because it is not a User defined class. It is a predefined. If it is a predefined class, container does not create the object. Spring container does not create the object for a predefined class. It will create the object only for user defined classes. In our first example, service A and service B both are user defined classes. Who is creating the dependent object? Spring container. Who is creating the dependency object? Spring container. Who is injecting the dependency object to the dependent object? Spring container. But in the second case, container can only create the what object? This is a dependent object, but container cannot create this dependency object because this is a predefined class. So if container doesn't create the predefined class object, then tell me container can inject the dependency object or cannot inject the dependency object? It can't inject the dependency object. What I will do? But this is my requirement. Then what should I do? I have to create what object? JMS template class object. I have to create JMS template class object and I have to do initialization of this object. Then I should push it into container. If I push this object into container, now tell me in the container JMS template object is also available. Container created or programmer has created? Programmer, but it is pushed into container. It is available in container now. That's why now the container is injecting this dependency object to the dependent object. Now you tell me, when you are writing your application classes, try to understand, sir. If you are writing your application classes, you guys need to tell me that suppose your class depends on a predefined class object. Then you tell me, will the container create the object for predefined class? No. Container can only create the objects for user defined classes and container can perform the dependency injection. But in case of predefined classes, container does not create the object for the predefined classes. So developer has to create object for the predefined class and developer has to take care of initializing that object and then developer has to push it into Spring container so that the Spring container will inject that object to dependent object. Are you able to follow me now? Then tell me, how can a developer can create the object, can initialize that object and can push it into the Spring container? How does developer can do all these tasks? By creating one method. Which method it is called? Bean method. Where do you write that bean method? Very good. Now we got the clarity. Now we got the clarity, right? First time వినంగానే అర్థం కాదు. Will take little bit time. Are you getting my point? Right, good. So basically, first of all, how to mark that a class is a configuration class in my project? At the rate configuration. At the rate configuration indicates that this is a Java configuration class. If it is a Java configuration class, what methods I can write inside the class? Bean methods I can write. If it is a configuration class, then only we can write bean methods. If it is a service class or if it is a controller class, you cannot write bean methods. You can't write bean methods. Bean methods only you can write in configuration class. If you write them in another classes like service class, repository class, or component class, or REST controller class, or controller class, then container does not execute them. I mean, Spring does not execute those methods. So where I can write bean methods? Only in the configuration. Remember that. Only in the configuration class we can write the bean methods. First of all, how to mark that this is a configuration class? By writing annotation. Which annotation? At the rate configuration. Now tell me, inside this class, which methods I can create? Bean methods I can create. Which methods I can create? Bean methods I can create. What a bean indicates? What this @bean indicates? This method is going to produce a bean, nothing but an object that should be stored into container. How many bean methods I can write? Multiple. First bean method, second bean method, depends on your requirement. You can able to create more than one bean method also. Now this is called what class? Configuration. Please try to understand today. You are getting new things, guys. One more thing. Sir, how many configuration classes I can write in my project? You can write one or multiple. Multiple also. For example, I need to write multiple bean methods. Writing all the bean methods in a single configuration class is going to become complex. What can I do? I can create two separate configuration classes. Let's say I want to name my first class name as appconfig1. My second class name as appconfig2. Can we write multiple configuration classes or not? Yes. This I am writing it as appconfig1, and one more configuration class I can write. One more configuration class I can write. I can say that public class appconfig2. Tell me, inside this also, which methods I can write? Bean methods I can write, @bean. Can I write this annotation on top of the class? Above the class, can we write this annotation? No. This annotation only we can write above the method, but not above the class. It is method level. Or we can write this annotation on top of another annotation, but not on top of the class. Of course, that also we are going to see that. Method above annotation. Where is configuration annotation? Class level annotation. Above the other annotation means above the annotation available on method. If you write @bean on top of the class, it is going to become what? Class level annotation. But this is only method level annotation. Good. Come to the point. Of course, we are going to see that. I'll tell you. One more thing, sir. Currently, we don't know about predefined classes. Later, we are going to see about the predefined Java classes we are going to use. Many times we are going to use. Okay. Right. So presently, to understand, I'm writing like this. What I'm writing? @bean. For example, @bean I'm writing. We can write anything, just I'm writing @bean. For example, I'm writing. Okay. Public class. Sorry, not class, na. Public return type. Return type is not a class, it's a method, right? Sorry. Public with return type is service A. Just I'm taking service A, or if you are feeling that service A, service we have used, some other names also we can use. Doesn't matter, just observe it. So public, let us say for example, sir, no problem. For example, public return type is car, method name is car. Similarly, I'm creating @bean, public. Actually, these are our classes only. Generally, when we create bean methods, okay, to create the objects for predefined classes and to initialize those objects, and then we want to store them in container. For that, we create which method? But currently, we don't know about predefined classes much. In further programming, you will learn. To understand bean annotation, I'm writing these examples. Now you tell me, how many bean methods I have created inside the class? There are 2 bean methods I have created. Tell me, first bean method will produce what object? Car object. That car object will be registered in the, means will be stored in the Spring container. Second bean method, bike object. It is again stored in the Spring container. But every object, when it is stored in the container, there should be an ID for that object. There should be an ID for the object. The ID of this object is same as method name. What's the method name? Car. What's the method name here? Bike. Now tell me the Spring container. This is called a Spring container. Nothing but Spring application context object. Spring application context object. Then you tell me inside this what objects are stored? Car object stored bike object. What's the idea of this car object? Car. What's the idea of this bike object? Bike. Same as method name. Same as what name? Method name. Car, bike. Did you guys understood this? Am I clear with the point? Okay, this is car object. This is what object? Bike object. This is registered with the name car. This is registered with the name bike. Very good. If I want to change it, I don't want to register with, I don't want to store the object in the container with ID as car and bike. I want to register them with C and B. Then I can do one thing. While writing bean annotation, I can pass here value is equal to. What I can write? Value is equal to. Value is equal to. Value is equal to is available. Name is equal to also available. We will check that. We have the annotation called @bean. If I go down, I can able to see the elements. Okay, you can see there is one element called what? Name. There is another element called what? Value. Value is alias for name. So we can write a name or value, any one we can use. Don't worry. Okay, we can use either name or value. Suppose I can write bean value is equal to C. Just a minute. Guys, tell me what should I write? Value is equal to C. Here what? Value is equal to B. We can name or value anyone. Value is equal to B. Now you tell me this is registered with which ID? B. This is registered with which ID? C. This is the way how we can change if you want. If you don't specify the value, then you tell me by default with which name they are registered? Method name only. By default, what name only? Method name only. For example, I'm writing like this. Everybody, try to understand this, guys. Everybody, suppose I'm writing one configuration class, and my configuration class is @configuration. Then public class app_config. Okay, I'm writing, please try to understand, @bean. For example, guys, I am writing an example like this. Public return type is JDBC template. Method name is JDBC template. Here, I'm instantiating the JDBC template object. I'm returning the object. I'm writing a comment. Instantiating means creating JDBC template object. Return OBJ. Now you guys tell me with which ID this JDBC template object is registered in the Spring container. This is the JDBC template object. Okay, this is Spring application context container. With which ID it is registered? This object is stored in the container with ID same as method name. What's the method name? JDBC template. So ID of this object is what? JDBC template. No, I don't want to store with the same as method name. I want to store it with the name only JT as ID. JT for JDBC template. This object, JDBC template object, I want to store with which ID? JT. Just JT is enough. Then I should customize or not? How can I? @bean, I can write either name attribute or value attribute. I can use name or value. Name is equal to double quotes JT. Am I clear with this now? Are you understood my point? That's it. So now, what are the two more annotations that you learned? One is called configuration. Next one is called bean. Configuration annotation. Configuration annotation is to mark that this class is a Java configuration class. Right? When are you going to Java configuration class? when are you going to do a Java configuration class? If you want to create one or more bean methods in the class. Okay, Java configuration class means it is a class which is the source for bean definitions. Which is a source for bean definitions. So means what, inside the class, we are going to create, whenever we want to create one or more bean methods, then we should write what class? Configuration class. Configuration class. Are you able to follow me? Configuration class. How do you create bean methods in the configuration class? By using @bean. What @bean indicates? This method produces a bean, nothing but object that should be stored in the Spring container. Actually, in Spring, who will create the objects? Who will create the objects and who will initialize the objects? Spring container. Then why are you creating objects by creating bean methods? I told Spring container will do, but only for user defined classes, but not for predefined classes. Suppose if any predefined class object also required in my application, then tell me who should create that object? User, programmer. And programmer has to, or the developer has to store that object in the Spring container. Then how developer can do these things? By creating the bean methods. To write the bean methods, developer has to write which class? Configuration class. Because bean methods we cannot only in the configuration class. Only in the configuration class. Am I clear with that? Okay. In a service class or in a repository class, okay, or in a REST controller class, can we write the bean methods? Can we write the bean methods? No. No. Where can we write the bean methods? Only in the configuration class. Please try to understand that. How many bean methods you can create in the configuration class? Multiple bean methods you can able to create. Multiple bean methods you can able to create. It's up to you. Are you able to get my point? But first let me add one or two statements on that. How many configuration classes we can write like this? How many configuration classes we can write like this? Multiple. Multiple also you can write. Again, this configuration class also registered in the Spring container. What's the idea of this configuration class? What's the idea of this configuration class? Same as class name. What's the class name? App config. What's the ID? A lowercase app config. How to customize it to AC? Same. Value is equal to AC. Value is equal to what? AC. Able to get my point? Very good. I'll tell you. But we got to know about the one more annotation. Who is the one more annotation of component annotation that we got it now? What is the annotation, guys? @configuration. You are understanding this is very important so that further you are not going to get any problems. @configuration. So tell me, this is also what level annotation only? It is also class level. It is a class level annotation. What is the purpose of this annotation? It is used to mark or specify anything. It is used to mark that a class is a which class? Java configuration class. It is used to mark that a class is a Java configuration class. Right? Next. Tell me, in a Java configuration class, what we can write? In a Java configuration class, what we write? Bean methods we can create. What methods we can create? Bean methods. Right. This, again I write, @configuration is derived from where only? @component only. Derived from @component. Next point. Okay. This annotation annotation indicates that a class is a source for one or more bean methods. Okay, tell me, this annotation indicates that a class is a source for one or more bean methods means what? Source means available. Okay, inside the class, the source is bean methods. Source means the code, or the code inside the configuration class, bean methods. @bean means bean methods, na? Very good. This annotation indicates that a class is a source for one or more bean methods. One or more bean methods. Okay. I'm writing continuation without writing separate annotation for bean. Okay. Tell me what @bean indicates. @bean indicates that a method produces an object which is also called as bean. Bean means object also. Tell me, @bean indicates that a method produces an object that should be pushed or stored into the Spring container. Able to get my point? That should be stored into Spring container. So which annotation for that we are writing? @bean. @bean is a what level annotation? Method level annotation. I'm continuation writing in both combinedly. Is a method level annotation. Method level is enough to remember. Method level annotation. So did you guys got the point now? Annotation. Tell me, @bean is a what level annotation? Method level annotation. Method level annotation. Right. So mostly when are we going to create bean methods? If you want to explicitly create an object, initialize an object, and then if you want to push it into the Spring container. Tell me, if you want to explicitly create an object, initialize an object, and then if you want to push it into the Spring container, then you have to create a which method? Bean method. Tell me, mostly we create bean methods for predefined classes or user defined classes? Why not for user defined classes mostly? Because for user defined classes, who will create the objects? Container. Who will initialize the objects? Container. But for predefined classes, developer only. The programmer only has to. The container will not do that. So another point I want to add, guys. Okay. Mostly we create bean methods for creating and initializing creating and initializing the objects for predefined classes. For the reason, because Spring container can create and initialize the objects for what? User defined classes. User defined classes only. You are getting multiple lines of statements here, guys. You are getting multiple lines of statements because Spring container can create and initialize objects for which one only? User defined classes only. And for that reason, did you guys understood now? Okay, for that reason, we are going to create which methods? Bean methods. So of course, I'll talk more on this later. Just I'm writing example. If I expand everything at one place, you may get again a confusion. At configuration, public class. What is my class name? App config, or any other name also you can write. Okay. @bean. Okay. @bean. Just I'm writing public. Don't worry about this. In further classes you will learn JDBC template. JDBC template. I'm writing a method like this. Okay. JDBC template is a user defined class or predefined class? Predefined class. Mostly we use it for which classes only? Predefined classes only. Here there is a logic. Okay. Instantiating. Instantiating and initializing. JDBC template object. Okay, return obj. Okay, just now I told you with which name or with which ID this object will be stored in the container. Same as method name. What's the method name? JDBC template. If you want to customize the name, then for the bean annotation, we can pass what? At parameter. What parameter we can pass? Either value parameter, otherwise name parameter we can pass. Am I clear with all these things now? Right. So with this, you got to know something, and we are ready to write. There is one more annotation that I need to explain. If I explain next one more annotation tomorrow, then we'll start the first example by using annotations. What's the next annotation that I'm going to explain is called component scan. What is that? What is the next annotation? Component scan. I told in Spring, there is a facility called what? Components auto scanning. Auto scanning is one facility given by Spring. But how can I enable it? Like I told, auto wiring is also one facility. But by default, auto wiring is disabled. If you want to enable auto wiring on a bean, you should write one attribute. What attribute? Auto wire. Auto wire is equal to by name or by type or constructor. Similarly, component scan also one facility given by Spring Framework. It's a facility available. But what we should do? We have to enable it. Further, this annotation. What is the annotation? @component scan. What is the purpose of this annotation? It is to enable the components auto scanning feature or the facility provided by the Spring. Are you able to follow me? Which annotation that I'm going to next talk about? Component scan. It is also class level annotation. It is also what level? Class level annotation. Very good. And observe it. Component scan, if I open, and I will conclude the class for today. Tomorrow I'll give you a question like what are called stereotype annotations. Suppose I'm talking about component scan. Of course, tomorrow I'll talk more on this. Component scan is annotation. Component scan. Could you guys see component scan annotation has any component annotation on top of it? Look at that. Do you have anything? Which means component scan is a derived annotation of component or not a derived annotation? Not a derived annotation. What about bean? @bean. It is not a derived from component. What are the annotations derived from component? You know, service, repository, controller, configuration. REST controller is there, but REST controller derived from controller. What about component scan? It is not derived from component. It is one more annotation, that's it. And one more thing. What's the target here? If you see the target as a type, then which means this annotation we can only use at class level. We can't use this annotation at what level? Method level. We can only use at what level? Class level. Are you able to follow me? Very good. Which annotation I'm talking about? component scan. Okay, tomorrow we will see this annotation. I told already now that is also possible. It is in your hands, but for predefined classes, it is mandatory. Yeah. Okay. That's for today, guys. I'll share these notes. Please go through it. Tomorrow, first we'll discuss about component scan annotation. Then we are going to see the first application with annotations without writing XML file. And from now onwards, we are not going to write beans.xml file. No XML file is required. From now onwards, we are going to write our programs only with the annotations without writing XML file. Okay, without writing XML file. Okay, we'll see tomorrow. Thanks.